Yes, Copilot is now free inside the apps you already use. But before you update your resume to include AI augmented professional, let's get something straight. This isn't new magic arriving from the cloud. It's redistributed intelligence, specifically Microsoft Graph data being made slightly more talkative. Marketing says Copilot is everywhere. Technically accurate. Functionally, that means your daily click habits have just been analyzed into a training dataset that chats back the truth. These integrations don't make your apps smarter. They make your context visible. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and OneNote now whisper to the same AI overlord through graph connections that track files, chats, and meetings. When that awareness works correctly, it saves you hours. When it doesn't, it auto-summarizes your boss's confidential email into your project decks. So yes, free inclusion sounds delightful, but it also means your privacy, compliance, and audit responsibilities just doubled. Let's strip the marketing varnish off and see what this actually changes. Outlook. AI becomes your inbox butler. Welcome to Outlook, the digital landfill of corporate communication. Copilot now lives here, patiently summarizing threads, suggesting replies, and pretending to care about your unread count. You open a 30-message conversation about launch schedules and instantly ask, "Summarize this email chain." Copilot reads it, extracts major updates, and drafts a courteous reply. In theory, you reclaim 10 minutes. In practice, you've invited an algorithm to judge your professionalism. Here's what's really happening. Copilot is pulling data through the Microsoft Graph, the connective bloodstream of Microsoft 365. It sees what you can see. Messages, metadata, and meeting invites you already have permission for. Then it builds a contextual snapshot. Who said what deadlines shifted, which attachment was ignored. When you ask for a recap, it's reasoning over that contextual graph node. No magic, just structured access with impressive formatting. Now, about privacy. Despite the paranoia, Copilot doesn't secretly browse the CEO's mailbox. It's constrained by the same permissions that Outlook itself enforces. The AI can't exceed your license boundaries or view mailboxes you're not delegated to. Still, when users start blindly sharing summaries, confidential content propagates faster than gossip in a Teams chat. Hence the need for vigilance, not because Copilot leaks data directly, but because humans do. Think of Copilot as an overqualified assistant trapped inside your inbox, miserably efficient, perpetually monitored, and willing to write your sorry for the delay emails while secretly judging your sentence fragments. The brilliance is that it finally gives you extraction tools for buried context. The danger is trusting every suggestion like gospel. IT admins get homework out of this. Data loss prevention policies now intersect with AI responses. If your tenant's DLP configuration flags confidential terms, say project code names, Copilot must respect those boundaries, refusing to summarize or quote restricted content. Microsoft Purview supplies that guardrail, but only if configured. Otherwise, Copilot will dutifully rephrase sensitive text into something you thought was innocuous until legal calls. There's another subtlety: message classification. Outlook Copilot interacts with items carrying sensitivity labels. If an email is tagged highly confidential, your generated summary inherits that label automatically, maintaining protection through every paste operation, unless of course someone screenshots the summary, because screens remain gloriously label immune. So administrators should enable activity logging in Purview to trace where AI-generated content lands. From a governance perspective, enabling Copilot is like adopting a pet tiger on Microsoft's assurance. It's probably tame. You'll want audit logs recording AI activity, change management processes verifying label inheritance, and a clear policy dictating when users can share AI-generated text outside tenant boundaries. The Copilot control system in the admin center exposes toggles for precisely this, limiting which mailboxes or categories Copilot can access. In short, Outlook Copilot improves your triage speed but not your judgment. It summarizes chaos elegantly, drafts replies politely, and reminds IT administrators why classification exists. The users will love it. Compliance officers will not. Now, step out of the inbox and into the writing space. Word's version of helpful interference lies ahead. Word. Drafting with context-aware precision. Step out of the inbox and into Word, where Copilot behaves like an overly confident editor armed with your digital history. The moment you open a document, it quietly interprets not just the text before it, but your entire work context. Previous drafts stored in OneDrive, linked reference files, even prior versions you thought you had deleted because they were rough. Spoiler: nothing is rough to the graph. It's simply data in waiting. Word's Copilot doesn't invent content in a vacuum. It triangulates. It reads your open file to gauge tone, syntax, and structure, and it references nearby documents that contextualize your writing. When you ask it to summarize the executive briefing, it checks the current document for hierarchy and markers, compares those with internal graph signals like related project notes, and then produces a bullet list that feels suspiciously like your manager's preferred format. The magic is not creativity, it's pattern recognition with impeccable recall. Its contextual awareness is unsettlingly thorough. It doesn't just know you're writing a report, it knows which meetings those topics appeared in, who emailed supporting evidence, and whether you've already used similar phrasing in a PowerPoint summary. Think of it as the intern who's read your entire SharePoint history. Terrifyingly thorough, occasionally presumptuous, and intermittently brilliant. You can refine tone on the fly by saying, make it more formal or reduce jargon, and Copilot dynamically restructures existing paragraphs while maintaining your document's metadata and formatting. Of course, the very same awareness that makes it efficient also creates governance friction. If the AI pulls references from a confidential planning file, that contextual residue may surface phrases or data not meant for the current document. Microsoft Purview's information protection labels exist for precisely that reason. Sensitivity labels applied to a source file carry into generated text so long as administrators haven't disabled inheritance. But users, being human, can copy, paste, and circumvent protections faster than policies can adapt. Administrators should therefore ensure audit logs capture not just user edits but also Copilot-generated suggestions. The new Copilot activity events in Microsoft 365 audit logs list prompt text, response length, and correlated file IDs, useful for determining whether that AI summary included content from a restricted library. And yes, turning those logs on means expanding your storage and governance overhead. Free Copilot, not free compliance. When Copilot rewrites a paragraph, it performs in-generation content inspection, checking for sensitivity markers. This is where data governance finally becomes proactive. If your purge policies label financial projections as restricted, Word Copilot can refuse to include that section in an executive-ready summary. But if policy enforcement is relaxed, the AI gladly integrates data from multiple departments, violating your own compartmentalization, beautifully formatted non-compliance. Used responsibly, Word's Copilot truly increases semantic accuracy. It can restructure a technical document into an abstract, convert minutes into a press release, or fix tone inconsistencies between collaborating authors. Used mindlessly, it can generate a pristine, well-phrased leak of confidential strategy. The difference is configuration. Governance tip: enable policy tips for generated content. They behave like those gentle spelling error indicators, but for confidentiality. The tooltip might read, "This content derives from a file labeled sensitive, review before sharing." Most users will ignore it immediately. At least you'll have proof they were warned. Administrators should consider creating Copilot-specific acceptable use guidelines, define what can be delegated to the AI, log prompt histories, and add mandatory disclaimers for output insertion. Because, like every AI assistant, Word's Copilot knows everything you know, exactly the amount most people should never share in public. Word enhances your writing. It doesn't absolve you from thinking. It ensures consistency, accelerates production, and when misused, accelerates discovery violations. Excel, on the other hand, takes that same contextual fluency and turns it into an illusion of analytical brilliance. Excel, data whisperer or liability amplifier. Welcome to Excel, the world's favorite database pretending to be a spreadsheet. Copilot here operates as your analyst who never sleeps. You can now type, generate a bar chart showing satisfaction by region, and watch it orchestrate calculations, select a color palette, and insert the visualization without you specifying column ranges. It infers structure and relationships automatically through the Microsoft Graph, reading headers, detecting numeric fields, and applying context from prior workbooks tied to your identity. This is where Copilot becomes equal parts miracle and menace. On one hand, you can ask natural language questions, what trends stand out for Q4, and instantly receive summaries complete with formulas and pivot recommendations. On the other hand, those insights are built by correlating tables you might have never explicitly connected. The intern effect again. Copilot guesses your intent 80% correctly and convinces you it was 100% right. Confidence without verification, the statistical equivalent of workplace sarcasm. Behind the interface, Copilot interprets each table as an object with metadata derived from the graph. Column headers become entities, cell types inform relationships. Previous calculations hint at dependencies. When you ask for a trend, it scans formulas, annotations, and even comment threads from teams about that dataset. It's reasoning, not searching. That's what makes results seem miraculous, until it confidently misreads an outdated dataset. For all its brilliance, this is where data governance panic sets in. Copilot can surface values from linked workbooks stored on shared drives. If those files contain sensitive metrics, financial, HR, or legal, those numbers might reappear in a generated summary inside a completely unrelated sheet. Excel isn't leaking anything beyond your access scope, but it is expanding your potential to redistribute that data without noticing. The administrative countermeasure is old-fashioned. Role-based access control and dataset permissions. Copilot respects whatever Purview and Entra ID configurations dictate. If the dataset lives in a site restricted to finance, a marketing user invoking Copilot won't retrieve financial context. In theory. In practice, Misconfigured share links turn theory into audit findings. Hence, before enabling Copilot broadly, validate that Drive and SharePoint permissions reflect genuine need-to-know boundaries. Free Copilot also means newly surfaced risk vectors. AI-generated charts could contain derivative data from sources users didn't intend to share. Embed that image in a PowerPoint deck, and congratulations, you just gave away salary analytics during an investor call. Admins should apply watermarking policies to generated visuals and enforce label inheritance through Purview automatically. For executives, Copilot in Excel is the ultimate delusion amplifier. It presents correlations as insights, patterns as conclusions. Without human skepticism, it can make weak data look authoritative. The correct workflow is let Copilot draft, then let humans verify formulas and sample results. Governance should enforce that review by policy, maybe require peer validation before Copilot-authored workbooks are distributed externally. Think of it as a modern code review for arithmetic. Still, when configured properly, Excel's Copilot is transformative. Trend summaries that took analysts hours appear in seconds. Simple queries produce interactive charts. You gain time until you spend it in compliance meetings cleaning up what the AI helpfully exposed. That's why every Copilot deployment should include at least one trained data steward overseeing its activity logs, reviewing prompt histories, and ensuring generated insights aren't marching confidential data straight into PowerPoint. From rigid rows to persuasive slides, Copilot's next incarnation translates your structured knowledge into meeting-ready graphics. PowerPoint is where chaos gains polish and AI decides it has a sense of design. The real question becomes, whose structure just made its way onto those slides? Because in Microsoft 365, visual flair and compliance risk now share the same template. PowerPoint, generative design meets corporate reality. And now we arrive at PowerPoint, where good ideas go to die, dressed in gradients. Copilot here serves as the overeager design intern who can't resist helping even when you didn't ask. You open a blank deck, mutter, summarize our product update report into slides, and within seconds, it pulls text from Word, charts from Excel, and images from your OneDrive, all threaded together like it actually understands narrative flow. It doesn't. It understands file metadata and recurring slide titles, which is close enough for corporate work. Its integration is genuinely impressive. Through the Microsoft Graph, Copilot can search your connected workspace for relevant assets, documents, data sources, and chat exchanges and propose entire slide structures. When you import an executive summary from Word, it automatically converts section headers into slide headings, retaining styles and bullet hierarchies. Generate visuals for slide 5, and it conjures an image by querying the integrated generative model, perhaps a high-tech ECG sensor, like in Microsoft's demo. That's when your deck suddenly looks like a design agency effort, which is precisely how people get fired for overselling visuals unsupported by data. Copilot treats content like atomized building blocks. The graph provides object identifiers for every referenced file, meaning that when it assembles a deck, those relationships persist. A slide created from a Word section remembers which document and version it came from. Administrators should care about that. Those internal linkages appear in metadata, making the AI-generated deck part of a cross-document transparency chain, great for traceability, fatal for anyone who thought they could quietly recycle confidential material. Think of PowerPoint Copilot as giving Photoshop to a meeting invite. It suddenly has opinions about layouts, contrast ratios, and the emotional weight of gradients. You can still override its design choices, but now each suggestion carries audit trail entries referencing AI-proposed modifications. That's right, even your font indulgences are now part of compliance history. The productivity advantage is real. You can feed it multiple inputs, say a quarterly report in Word and an Excel sheet, and instruct create a 10-slide deck summarizing key findings for leadership. Copilot arranges the slides, writes captions, and suggests talking points. It saves hours. Yet every generated image or chart inherits your tenant's data handling responsibilities. Copilot doesn't exempt those assets from data retention, classification, or deletion schedules. If your security policies exclude generated images from content classification, congratulations, you've built an unlabeled loophole. Governance here matters more than aesthetics. Generated assets should trigger metadata labeling via Purview automatically. Admins can enforce that AI-created slides include embedded sensitivity tags and watermarks. Why? Because an illustrative chart might derive from a sensitive table in Excel, and PowerPoint doesn't know when aesthetics cross into disclosure. Enforce tagging at generation, not retroactively, otherwise you'll be cleaning up after accidental data art shows. Admins can control these behaviors using the Copilot control system inside the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Here they can toggle AI features per app, require approval for image generation, and standardize tenant-wide compliance templates. The AI administrator role minimizes overreach, allowing management of Copilot without granting global admin rights. Configure it, or prepare for presentations that confidently violate your own storage policies. When used thoughtfully, PowerPoint Copilot transforms scattered data into coherent narrative flow. When misused, it publishes every unredacted truth with cinematic flair. After all, AI doesn't understand discretion, it just illustrates it beautifully. After the slides are done and the applause is fake, your fragments of genius need somewhere to live. Enter OneNote, the quiet archive that's suddenly self-aware. OneNote, structured recall and meeting intelligence. OneNote has always been the corporate junk drawer, snippets of ideas, screenshots, and barely legible meeting notes languishing in desynchronized notebooks. Now, Copilot lives here, politely judging your organizational choices. You can ask, summarize these meeting notes, and it assembles coherent highlights, identifies action items, and even proposes follow-up tasks drawn from recognized to-do phrases. It doesn't just organize your thoughts, it gentrifies them. At a technical level, OneNote Copilot relies on the same graph foundation as its siblings, but tuned for temporal relationships. It understands that the notes you took during a meeting correlate with that meeting's transcript, attendee list, and attached documents. When you ask for key points from Monday's project call, Copilot cross-references the team's meeting notes, relevant Outlook emails, and related files, merging them into a clean summary that looks like you were paying attention. This contextual linkage effectively turns OneNote into an index of your work memory. Each page becomes a queryable node in the graph, time-stamped, permission-scoped, and correlation-rich. Ask, find related notes about Core fiber performance, and Copilot surfaces pages, documents, and chat snippets containing that term across your permitted ecosystem. Think of it as your personal librarian with mild judgment who quietly sighs every time you name a notebook misc. Governance, however, quickly enters the conversation. Because Copilot can traverse meeting transcripts and documents, its reach touches multiple data-classified sources. If a team's call is labeled confidential, the derived OneNote summary must inherit that label automatically. Microsoft Purview performs this through content sensitivity propagation. Yet, administrators must verify that notebooks follow the same retention policies as email or documents. Otherwise, your summary becomes an untracked, long-living derivative of protected data. From a workflow perspective, OneNote Copilot eliminates context switching. It can generate task lists, link back to relevant documents, and even pre-draft recap emails directly from your notes using the Outlook Graph connector. It turns your scattered chaos into structured recall, an appealing prospect for people who treat organization as optional. But the same convenience magnifies oversight failures. Without disciplined access controls, an intern's shared notebook might now contain auto-generated summaries of executive meetings. Administrators should establish retention labeling for notebooks and control sharing scope. Shared notebooks synced to public Teams channels should have AI summarization disabled unless content classification is mandatory. Evaluation reports and customer briefings, for instance, should live in restricted notebooks only accessible to relevant roles. Set notebook-level permissions aligned with Entra ID roles, ensuring Copilot's reasoning boundary never exceeds the user's legitimate view. Copilot usage analytics inside the Microsoft 365 Admin Center become invaluable here. Admins can monitor prompt frequency, summary generation patterns, and shared notebook activity to identify misuse or anomalies. The Copilot dashboard aggregates this into metrics: who used it, for what, and how often sensitive data interactions occurred. It's the surveillance you secretly need to keep creativity compliant. OneNote's Copilot also exposes how poor personal governance becomes organizational risk. People forget that meeting summaries, when joined with project documentation, essentially reconstruct internal decision flows. Every AI-generated highlight is a breadcrumb for auditors, or worse, competitors if shared externally. The safest configuration ensures that retention labels and encryption keys apply consistently across generated content. Microsoft designed that automation, but IT must confirm it's active. Used responsibly, this Copilot turns incomplete scribbles into structured intelligence. It closes the loop between thought capture and action tracking. Used recklessly, it becomes the world's most searchable liability archive. Picture a unified notebook summarizing cross-department meetings. Efficient, yes, and one subpoena away from performance art. So far, Copilot behaves like 5 distinct assistants, each fluent in its app's dialect, each powered by the same omniscient graph. Together, they form a distributed intelligence network that finally makes Microsoft 365 feel less like separate tools and more like a coherent organism. Under the hood, the graph and the controls. Here's where the metaphors stop being cute and start being critical. The Microsoft Graph isn't just an API. It's the circulatory system of everything Copilot touches. Every message, file, meeting transcript, and calendar invite you've ever synchronized is a data point flowing through it. Copilot doesn't pull from thin air. It drinks directly from this bloodstream, metabolizing your organizational memory into what appears to be intuition. When you ask a question in any 365 app, the request travels along that same graph route, aggregating signals from email threads, chat history, document metadata, and even Teams recordings. It's coherence masquerading as intelligence. Think of the graph as the company's internal nervous system, each neuron representing a user, each synapse a permission boundary. Copilot rides that network following the security context embedded within every data object. The good news, it can only perceive what you can. The bad news, if your permissions are sloppy, it inherits your sloppiness perfectly. Enterprise controls exist precisely to restrain this omnivorous curiosity. Data loss prevention rules dictate which content Copilot can summarize or regenerate. Sensitivity labels attached to Word files or Outlook messages flow along the graph pathways, ensuring the AI maintains protection down to the token level. Microsoft Purview acts as the immune system, examining every prompt, inspecting outputs, and enforcing boundaries when users push requests into inappropriate territory. An executive might ask Copilot to summarize last quarter's confidential planning meeting, and Purview can intercept, reminding them that confidential content can't be shared. If that rule isn't configured, Copilot helpfully replies anyway. Then there's e-discovery. Every exchange with Copilot leaves forensic breadcrumbs, logs of prompts, outputs, and timing visible in the Microsoft 365 audit portal. This traceability keeps the compliance office from fainting whenever someone says AI suggestion. Those records prove who asked what and what the system responded. In regulated industries, those audit trails are legally equivalent to communications records. Forget to enable them, and you'll have undocumented data generation at scale. Another layer, the AI administrator role. Microsoft added it so organizations can delegate Copilot control without creating accidental deities. This role manages Copilot settings, feature toggles, access boundaries, and model behavior without global admin power. It's the bureaucratic buffer preventing your SharePoint admins from inadvertently rewriting corporate history with a single prompt. All of it lives in the Copilot control system inside the admin center. Here's where administrators can enable or block Copilot per app, connect custom data sources, or enforce tenant-wide governance rules. Think of it as mission control for your AI workforce. You can even monitor usage metrics, prompt frequency, failed summaries, and which departments generate the most AI content. Those analytics inform whether Copilot is a productivity multiplier or a compliance liability in progress. Security inheritance also plays a quiet hero role. Each graph object carries access control lists. Copilot never sidesteps them. If an employee loses access to a document, the AI instantly forgets it. This dynamic scope makes Copilot's reasoning context fluid, expanding or shrinking as permissions change. Theoretically bulletproof, practically dependent on synchronized policies between Entra ID and Purview. Lag there, and you'll have phantom access where none should exist. So, yes, Microsoft calling Copilot included is technically accurate. But free? No. Every feature you just saw draws power from governance frameworks that need deliberate configuration. Without those, you're not enabling intelligence, you're enabling inference without supervision. Graph integration means Copilot knows the relational shape of your data. Whether it remains secure depends on how seriously IT treats its cardiovascular health. Now that you know what it does and how it thinks, we arrive at the inevitable endpoint for every ambitious deployment: responsibility. Inclusion changes accessibility, not accountability. The same Copilot that drafts your reports also memorizes how your organization handles data. Microsoft made it universal. They didn't make it harmless. AI can't fix a broken workflow. It merely exposes that you're operating without one. If you're an admin, treat free Copilot as an unbudgeted compliance project disguised as a feature drop. Configuration, auditing, and policy synchronization are the true prices of admission. Verify Purview inheritance, validate Entra ID scopes, enable Copilot audit logging, and watch your governance metrics like uptime charts. You'll sleep better. For users, the promise is still remarkable. Word writes cleaner, Excel explains trends, PowerPoint builds elegantly, Outlook replies faster, and OneNote actually remembers things. But none of that excuses negligence. The new skills you need aren't prompts, they're guardrails. So before you celebrate the inclusion announcement, run a tenant audit. Check your DLP triggers, confirm sensitivity labels propagate, make sure someone actually owns the AI administrator role. Configure first, brag later. If this saved you time or panic, repay the debt, subscribe, enable notifications, and let the next episode arrive like a well-timed security patch. Do the efficient thing now.